Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Sharon, and in today's video, I want to talk to you about my journey into UX design and my background and how I started this completely new career for myself. Now, if you don't already know, I'm a completely self-taught UX designer. I did not study design, I did nothing related to design in school, and I want to tell you a bit more about how that was like for me. So of course, if that sounds like something that you're interested in, please do not forget to support me by liking, sharing, commenting, and of course subscribing to my channel. Now without wasting any more time, let's get into today's video. So for those of you who do not know, I am from Nigeria and I grew up mostly in Lagos. That's where I spent most of my adult life before I moved over to Germany. Now, while I was in Lagos, I studied, that's where I also did my university, and I went to the University of Lagos and I studied a course called Estate Management. Now, I know what you're thinking, completely unrelated to design. Yes, absolutely. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, I did not study anything even remotely related to design. So how did I get into design, you might be asking? Well, let's talk about it. So when you're in university, you're probably going to be looking for ways that you can supplement the income that you probably get from your parents or guardian or whoever is taking care of you. So I, at the time, was simply looking for a means that I could make some extra money to sustain myself outside of what I was getting from my parents at the time. Now, I had always kind of been interested in design related things and in arts and crafts. So I've always been the kind of person who wants to do things with her hands. I've always enjoyed drawing, painting, and things like that. I wasn't necessarily good at it. So don't watch this and think, oh my God, I need to know how to draw or anything like that. No, I just was kind of interested in it. And so I probably just leveraged that interest. So while I was looking around for things to do, I got my first laptop. And when I got this, I had heard a bit about graphic design and it's kind of popular in general. So I set up Photoshop, I downloaded Adobe Illustrator, and I just set up this entire tool set on my tiny little laptop then that could help me get into graphic design. Now, even though I had limited access to the kind of internet that you need to really be able to watch the extensive tutorials that you need to get into design, to get into graphic design specifically, I was able to find ways, through friends, through public Wi-Fi, through, all sorts of things. And I was really going at these YouTube tutorials and practicing different things and learning about photo manipulation and all of that. Once I had done a lot more Photoshop, I kind of settled a bit more on Illustrator because it was more in line with what I wanted to do. So I was now going into creating logos and branding and doing all of that for people. So at this time, of course, I had zero clients. I had no idea what I was doing. I started creating these fictional logos to get myself more acquainted with how logo design worked and also to create some sort of a portfolio for myself that I could use to start getting clients. So I started posting on Instagram and sharing a lot of my content out there and also presenting it to some of my friends and family to get feedback and also to get potential clients. Now, a lot of my first clients were also in university along with me because they too were looking for ways to set up their business and make some extra money. And that was how I started my journey into graphic design. So I grew a little bit quickly in that area. I started getting clients, I started making a little bit extra money. And then from there, I expanded my service offering a little bit more. And from there, I started doing websites. So I started creating websites with a tool known as WordPress, which of course everybody knows WordPress, but then it was probably even more popular than it is today. And so I was helping people set up their online presence with WordPress. And it was also a way to of course make some extra money, but it was really getting me very interested into the whole world of technology, of web, and all of that. And so it was giving me something to really think about. So I did that for a while. And mind you, the process of kind of really getting into this design and actually setting up a small business for myself probably took about a year. And so in this period, I went from going from knowing absolutely nothing to going through a lot of YouTube videos and actually creating a tiny little side hustle for myself while I was in school. So after I moved through this process of working with, creating websites, the next thing for me was I started getting interested in front-end development. Now, if you've worked with WordPress before, you know that if you want to get the best out of it, you might have to manipulate some code once in a while, some CSS, some PHP here and there. And so it got me interested in not just being able to work with pre-made things, but to also be able to build custom things. And also I was looking at my future. Being able to create for WordPress and set up WordPress websites usually helps you create a cool freelance career. But in the long run, if you're looking to create a full-time career where you're working somewhere, it's usually more helpful if you also know how to code. And that's what I was seeing as I was searching for jobs and full-time jobs. Even though I was still in school, I was doing some research. So I started learning about front-end development. So I started doing some YouTube courses. YouTube was my everything back then because I couldn't, take courses. That was going to be really expensive and I was just a student. So I was taking a lot of these YouTube courses, a lot of these YouTube tutorials, following them through, and I was learning about HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and even a little bit of Angular and some backend Node.js. And for me at the time, it was really interesting. And I was really getting into it and trying to learn and building, these tiny little applications like a calculator, a to-do list, some very basic landing pages, and all of that. And so at the time, even though I didn't spend too long within that line of business, it was really interesting for me. So after this, I had a conversation with a really good friend of me at the time, and he told me, hey, you're really interested in design and you're also a bit technical. Have you considered learning a bit about user experience design? And for me, that was totally new. I had never heard of this before, and it was such a new concept for me. So I got home, did my research, and I was completely sold because it combined everything that I could easily say I was really passionate about. And I was passionate about design, I was passionate about products, technical things, and I just wanted to be really hands-on and involved in things. And user experience design seemed to give me that opportunity. So once I had learned that this was something I was 100% interested in, while still keeping my side business open, I started learning about it. Now, this was my process for learning and becoming a self-taught user experience designer. Now, the first thing I said that I did, which is similar to how I started with graphic design and front-end development as well, was YouTube videos. I was living, breathing, sleeping on YouTube, reading a lot of articles as well, and just trying to understand. Now, for me, coming from a design background, I probably focused too much on the UI aspect, and I didn't learn as much about the user experience aspect in a more theoretical point of view. So for me, I was watching a lot of YouTube videos back then about how to use Photoshop for design, how to design things in Adobe Illustrator. And of course, more tools came out. Back then I was using a Windows laptop, so I did not have access to Sketch. So I was doing all of these other things in Adobe Illustrator and Photoshop. And so I was learning a lot more about this, and I started churning out a lot of these designs and working and just practicing a lot from the visual design perspective. And of course, a lot of my designs back then were absolute crap, but they really, really did help me gain a lot of understanding. So the first thing I really did was just getting into YouTube, following a lot of tutorials, and practicing a lot. The second thing I got into was really creating a timetable for myself that I used to watch these videos and also read a lot of articles and take notes. So I was using this as an opportunity to balance my school, my side business with graphic design and WordPress and all of that I was still running, while also learning something completely new. So I had to draft some sort of timetable for myself that I was adhering to in a pretty strict way. So after I had gone through learning about a lot more about the visual design and some theoretical aspects, beyond practicing UI, I also started to build a portfolio for myself. So I was putting together conceptual work and really packaging it and putting it together. Now at that time, it wasn't really in a case study format, to be honest. It was more focused on visuals. I would say case studies are a bit newer. I mean, of course, for entry-level people, they were still able to get, jobs and opportunities without having to write case studies a couple of years ago. Right now, it's almost impossible, but back then it was kind of feasible. And so I used that to create a portfolio for myself, and I started, applying for these jobs. Now, mind you, as I mentioned, I mostly had knowledge of visual design and the UI aspects. And so that was where most of my focus was. And I started getting some freelance opportunities from friends, from people connections, and I just continued going in that. And that helped me build up on the user experience side of it. And so from there, I started to solve these problems that I was presented with. I had to go back and do a lot more learning, do a lot more studying about the more theoretical aspects of design. And for me, that was a completely new terrain, and I'm very grateful for everybody that was really patient with me in that time as I was learning more about this field. And as I continued, I would add this work that I had done into my portfolio. Back then I was using just a Behance portfolio. I would put all of my practice, everything, I would just put it together and upload on Behance. Basically, the minute I was done with school, I started a full-time job opportunity. So from there, I started working, and it really having that full-time job really grounded me and showed me a lot of areas that I needed to work on. And this time was spent, really just bending my head and getting the work done, and it really did help me. Now, I know that in today's world it's a bit different. It's a bit tougher to get your first full-time job, and I do have another video in which I talk a bit more in depth about how to get into UX design by yourself as a fully self-taught person. I do talk about in this video how to get into UX design as a fully self-taught person. But I would say for a fact that these principles still remain the same, which is get your resources from as many places as possible, study as much as possible, do the UI aspects as well as the user experience aspect. I do have a study guide that you can check out. The link is in my bio. And just go through that process, and then as quickly as you can start creating, start designing, start putting yourself out there, create a portfolio, put together simple case studies, and put yourself out there and start applying for opportunities. Don't just stay in the loop of doing videos and watching tutorials. Actually start solving problems and putting yourself out there. So that was how I started from absolute nothing and got into the field of design. So I really hope today's video was helpful for you. If it was, please do not forget to support me by liking, sharing, commenting, and of course, subscribing to my channel. Thank you so much for watching, and see you next time.